How you
Let's
doing,
see
man?
here.
How you
I'm doing
doing?
good. I'm doing good. There we
Right
go.
on.
Now I'm getting centered.
There we go.
There
There
we
we
go.
go. Right on. Yeah, it's weird. It's so weird to have you on the other side of stuff, and it's so
Mhm.
weird to like see you on my screen, and I'm like talking to you now. I'm not just watching you.
I'm
So
actually a lot more comfortable on this side of the camera.
I
I'm more comfortable as an interviewee than an interviewer.
oh yeah, it's so hard. Like that's one of the things. Like I mean, we've talked about it before. Like with my show, a lot of the interviews that I do is just like people that call in. So with your show, I love your show because there's so much prep that goes into it. The episodes are so tight. There's a density to it. And then with mine, it's just like it feels like it goes on forever, and it's like just off the cuff kind of stuff. But similar, it's like when you're kind of like interviewing someone or having a conversation, especially when you're doing it live. It's like you're thinking of three things at once. It's like you're listening to them, and then you're like trying to think of what to do. So it is a lot. It's nice to
It,
be on the other side.
it
Hang
is. It's
out.
a completely different animal, and I think our two shows kind of dovetail really well together. We know that your kind of long form content is really popular. We have Joe Rogan and Lex Friedman and
Right.
everybody else that have a lot of success with that, but the idea of my show, and we've talked about this, is completely different. I'm trying to cram as much information into an hour as possible to get that information out there.
Yeah.
I kind of try to be the creator's creator. So I'm trying to create content that the other influencers throughout the rest of crypto and media outlets can then use to know what's going on in the Hedera ecosystem. And of course, it doubles as something for H barbarians to go and get all the information of what's happening in the space. But they both really work well together, I think.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I've played your clips on the show before, and yeah, it's a great source. You definitely interview people at the source. But I mean, the big news here is no longer at the foundation. You're a free agent. It's definitely your recent posts on X kind of I've seen a new energy from you, but also I was kind of reminded of like the pre-foundation HBAR Bull, like the
Mhm.
before you were there. So it's kind of been refreshing, but like, for you, I mean, it's been less than a week or whatever, but how's that change been for you?
I think a load has been taken off in some ways. I mean, I guess we could go back to the beginning of why I think it happened and all that kind of stuff,
Mm,
but um, I like it. I think I'm going to be able to focus on what I want to focus on and what I think has the most benefits. Just that my managers, they were managing. They've had
right.
certain things that they wanted to do, but since there has been people in the ecosystem that reached out and they're like, we really want to try to keep you in the ecosystem and doing what you're doing.
Right.
So hopefully that's going to work out and I'm going to be able to stick around. Now, I'm not 100% sure. I would say I'm 75% sure.
Right.
I'll always be part of the ecosystem. Don't get me wrong. Regardless if I'm doing another job in another industry, I'm always going to be engaged, just part of my life now. But I've fallen in love a long time ago with the Hedera ecosystem and the potential. I think that's the main thing,
Yeah.
the potential of the Hedera ecosystem and what could come from it. But I've also kind of fallen in love with this role of being at the center
Mm,
of it and being able to talk to all these different people, like yourself and Milan and
yeah.
Karate Combat, all of the different ecosystem builders out there. I think it's a really fun place to be, even though I don't necessarily think it's my strength. I like doing it. So
Right.
if it's that or another role, I really hope that I can continue on with a career in the space.
And this is, you hit on something really important, and you and Milan talked about on your show, kind of the concept of that intrinsic motivation.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you saw that Paul Graham essay that kind of caught fire, like the founder mode and manager
Mhm.
mode and stuff. So there's a lot of, I think that shared across the ecosystem. And I think just in the technology industry in general, I think there's so much change happening, but that's the part, like, to be honest, I mean, that's what really scares me about this ecosystem is folks like yourself, like Milan. When we talk about these really intrinsically motivated people in this ecosystem that have brought so much energy to it, and then I hear you and you're like, I'm 75% sure I can kind of stay, and it's like,
Yeah.
though, I think those are the very real realities that we have to really accept as an ecosystem. The fact that there are consequences to how you manage an ecosystem, and if done incorrectly, we're not going to unpack everything we've talked about over the last few months, but if you do fall short in certain ways, you can lose those intrinsically motivated people.
Mhm.
And it's not like there's an infinite supply of those folks, especially folks that have been here since the beginning. So maybe what we can do is kind of start to unpack that a little bit. I know you mentioned that, what that was like, being let go from the foundation and kind of where you're at, and, how you kind of see things playing out for yourself in the weeks and months to come.
Well, I guess I'll start. I want to get back to the intrinsically motivated people
Yeah.
because I think that's really key. And it not only has it, is it makes sense intuitively, and watching the people that have that intrinsic motivation, seeing what they can accomplish,
Mm.
but it's actually borne out in what we've seen in the ecosystem, where the most success we have. So I hope we can retouch on that. But
Oh yeah.
going back to what has happened over the past few months, there were grumblings, and I'm sure you saw it in smaller chats and things like that on Telegram around the compensation issue. Oh, are you still there?
Oh yeah. I'm still here.
Okay.
I'm just throwing you up big. Sometimes the guests, I like to give you center stage. So don't worry. I'm still here.
All good. All good. So, there was grumblings around the compensation issue. And I did my due diligence. I followed up and I was like, yeah, this looks like, it is compensation and so forth. So I dutifully went to the general counsel at the foundation. I was like, hey, this could be an issue, and just trying to give him a heads up. And then it broke more publicly, this stuff came out. And then as whatever you want to call it, an influencer, a key opinion leader in the Hedera ecosystem, somebody that covers the news in the space in general, I felt like it was my responsibility to give an opinion because people look at you and I, Brandon, and other people, and they might be only ankle deep right in the ecosystem. Right. They might just be real passive and just kind of keeping an eye on it from afar. And they look to people like us, like, is this okay? Is this, what context does this have? Right. So I feel like I have to give my opinion in that context. So now, I'm certainly not going to do that without giving my employer a heads up, especially when I'm speaking out kind of against what their opinions might be, right?
For sure, yeah.
So I did that, and I also said, I'll resign. I understand this is something that you might not want, so if it's necessary, I feel that strongly about it that I'll resign. They said that's not necessary. You don't have to resign. To their credit, they I guess right. Open to some ideas, and that's fine. But then, I went out and I said it, and I think that it was good to keep that conversation going. And you might have seen some of my other posts, things around staking and things like that.
Right.
And there was a little bit of a shift after that time where I got a lot more pushback, I think, than I had seen before. And I almost felt like they were trying to get me to go on my own. And I was like, I already gave you the chance. If I was going to resign, I gave you that opportunity. Now, if you want me to go, you're going to have to do it yourself. And that's fine. They made that decision. I want to reiterate that I'm thankful for that opportunity to have been able to do this thing, this part of the ecosystem that I've kind of fallen in love with. And, Shane was let go, and new people came into the leadership role over there, and I think they saw the end of my contract, which is pretty much normally an automatic re-up. They saw it as an opportunity. Okay, now we can let them go.
Right.
And I'm kind of up in the air right now as far as what's coming in the future. I really don't know. I want to continue doing my show. My show is going to come out on Friday. I certainly see for the rest of the month, and I would say there's probably a good chance that I'm going to stay in the ecosystem. But that's kind of where things have gone from here. And they wanted to go in a different direction. I do want to say exactly the reason they gave me, even though I do think that some of my we'll say openness. Right. Probably had something to do with it. They did say the decision not to renew my contract was made due to business needs and our evolving focus, and it wasn't an easy choice. So I'll leave it there.
Right. Now to get back to the intrinsic motivation stuff, I'm just putting a notice here for anyone. Please do what we can to keep HBAR Bull in the ecosystem. We need that 75% chance to turn to 100%. What I will say is intrinsic motivation, I think you're kind of touching on that where, a lot of people kind of say, I would be doing this for free no matter what. And then you end up in a position where you're given more resources, you're given more things, and you're like, oh my God, I can do so much more. That quality of intrinsic motivation is so important to cultivate because it literally just translates to people doing really big things for an ecosystem for nothing.
Hmm.
And what it requires to maintain is that communication, that transparency, that keeping that motivation up. And I think that's definitely also been a struggle. And I mean, again, you and Milan talked about that on your show, and it definitely resonates with me as someone who is, shall we say, to a fault, intrinsically motivated.
Same thing. I mean, I left my last career. I took a 60% pay cut coming over here. And
Right.
thank gosh my wife is super supportive because she supported that.
That's
And I'm a
awesome.
lot happier now that I've made that. It was difficult going through that transition. And I was in that, and I was in a leadership role that we'll say was kind of respected. And then kind of going back down to the bottom of the barrel, that was difficult for me. And, I had
Right.
to process that. But I'm definitely happier now that I made that move into something that I'm passionate about. But going back to what we've actually seen in the ecosystem, we've seen that intrinsic motivation. Native builders have more success. We see that in the DeFi ecosystem, right? We have one team that has completely, has taken over the DeFi space for Hedera. And on
Yeah.
paper, if you would have looked at some of their competitors compared to them, you would have gone with the competitors because of
Sure.
past experience on other networks. Just, their resume looked really good, but they got taken to the woodshed
Yeah.
by Saucer Swap, right?
Yeah.
It's just, they got out competed. You see that with the wallets. We had a lot of multi-chain wallets, right? That
Hmm.
were supporting HBAR, but who are the most successful wallets in our space? You have the Blades, you have a Walla wallet, you have, of course, Hashpack.
Yeah.
In the gaming ecosystem, we've seen teams that get support, but Earthlings, completely
Yeah.
intrinsically motivated, fell in love. And even though they came to the space, they might not have been here from the beginning. You could tell they became true H barbarians. And that's one of the things that I was just starting to find ways to push at the HBAR Foundation. Like, I know a team that if you want to build this, I know a team in the space that can do this. And of course, they might
Right.
be working on 4 other projects in the Hedera ecosystem, but they would love to take on this project. And if you're going to pay some outsider to do it anyway, I know these guys are going to do a better job. So we
Right.
might as well go in that direction. And I never saw that pivot. Even though
Mm.
the evidence bore out that these native builders, these intrinsically motivated people were more successful, I never saw that pivot from the HBAR Foundation. And I hope I had.
Right. And I think that's something that we see across the board. And when we pull back a little bit, we have to remember, like, in my mind, there is this kind of necessary change that has had to happen. Like, this is now, a 6+ year old network and ecosystem that has developed even past those 6 years. Like, someone brought up Tune FM in the comments, and it's like, there's a project that's been around since the public mainnet. So there's all these different aspects to this. And I think that still there's this mentality of like, why choose a like indie developer or project or H barbarian when we could instead work with like a tried and true tested industry veteran or something? But kind of the reality is now is like, the people that are here, you could classify as tried and true veterans that are specialized in Hedera. So you look at teams like Hashpack or Saucer
Yeah.
Swap or Walla Wallet or any of these people, and you have these, 6 years in Web3 is a lifetime. And it's like, they are kind of like veterans and specialists in this space because there's so much, not only is there so much nuance to this network in the form of like its architecture and how it works, but just understanding the key players in the ecosystem, the dynamics, what to do, what not to do, how to grow an audience. And a lot of these projects already have a big audience. So I do think that it's like, to your point, it's the shift we've wanted to see from leadership to leverage the ecosystem more. I always say that like one of the most underutilized assets in this industry is the Hedera community,
Mhm.
to your point. So that's a really interesting thing. And kind of when you say, it's a change that you had wished that you've seen. I kind of think the same way. I was talking about the recent hires at Hashgraph or Swirlds Labs, and just kind of again seeing that enterprise drum being beaten, and we've got special purpose networks and this and that. It's like, what's coming back to the public network, right? What's going to be folding back into it? So
I would like to talk about that a little bit,
sure.
around the focus of these different organizations. But I do want to touch a little bit more around teams that can be brought in from elsewhere that can have that drive, that passion for the Hedera space. It's much more hit or miss, right? It's harder to find. I will say one of them is Karate Combat, right? They were brought in and they're passionate about what they're building, and Hedera works perfectly for that. So it was a great marriage, but I guess the shift is not necessarily that we want to shift completely to these native builders. It's just, I think the allocation of resources has been 90% to these outsiders and maybe 10% to insiders. And those numbers, who knows what it actually looks like, 80, even if it's 50, who knows what it is. But I think a lot more of those resources do need to go to those native builders because that's where we are seeing a lot of the success.
Yeah. Huge. And maybe we can now touch on that other topic you were kind of, talking about, like we were talking about the new hires and stuff to Hashgraph and kind of the culture. Maybe it ties a little into that like founder mode, manager mode type thing. Maybe let's just open that up. I can tell you're let's dive into it.
Well, I think we can go back to kind of the beginning there where we have these different organizations as becoming more decentralized. Actually, I'm going to really zoom out here.
Let's go way back in time. Let's go way back.
Well, I want to talk about, the cryptocurrency industry as a whole.
Okay.
And the way these assets are being viewed. Now, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we weren't in a really good spot. It was looking like some of these assets might be considered securities, and people were concerned about that. A lot of that has alleviated. It's becoming clear that, with the Ripple case and everything else, that these layer ones, especially something like HBAR, is not going to be a security, and rightfully so. This is being borne out under the law. We kind of see how they are going to stand. And what I think is going to happen is there is going to be regulation that comes out around this. The reason why these cryptocurrencies can't be securities is because there's not just things around protecting investors and all that kind of stuff, but there's also custody rules. There is also how you can transfer these assets. And if every time you're making a payment or doing a transfer or logging something on HCS, if you have to follow those requirements and those regulations for security, it just can't work. So you can't have the kind of innovation that we're looking for out of this industry if we were to deem these securities. But we need some of the same protections, right? It's also becoming clear that you are going to be able to use these assets, the distribution of these assets, to fund the building of these decentralized ecosystems. XRP is a great example.
Right.
HBAR and these cryptocurrencies not being securities aren't so you don't have to follow the regulations around protecting those that are supplying the capital, allocating the capital. The reason why securities laws were put in place were because companies were taking advantage of their investors. And so they did things, they wanted to level the playing field of information. So they had to disclose things like the financials of the organization, how much the executive were getting paid if they're going to tap into these public markets. It goes down. Look at the 10K. You can see all the things that they have to disclose. And since we are also taking capital from, even if it's through an intermediary, even if it's through an accredited investor, we know that the public cryptocurrency markets are where a lot of this capital is originating. And I think that should work. I think people should be able to benefit. But if we're doing that, we have to almost hold that capital that we're taking in with reverence, right? And make sure that we have the best interest of those that are supplying that capital at heart, truly. Yeah. And you can, again, look at other areas where capital is taken to fund things and take those as an example. You want to make sure they have all the information about what's happening within the ecosystem, the financials, where we stand, how much we're paying our executives to make sure there's no waste. Yeah. Be very careful and conservative with how you're spending that capital. Make sure it's being used in ways that they would want it to be used. They may not even know how it should be used. These are some of the people that might be deciding may be better deciders, but make sure that the end goal is in in their best interest, act kind of as a fiduciary.
Yeah.
I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent.
No, what you're getting at is like through kind of necessary transparency, even in like traditional companies, it does have a natural check and balance, because it doesn't imply that, an investor or group is going to be like watching like a hawk or nitpicking every little thing. It just means that if there is potentially like a picture being painted that those on the ground in the company can't quite see, maybe investors go, something's not quite right. And at least people can kind of highlight that or talk about it more publicly. And also too, what you're saying is, in Hedera's case, as a Web3 entity, it's weird because you could argue that Hedera has less transparency in some ways than some of those like traditional organizations when it comes to understanding how things are being utilized, where resources are being allocated,
Certainly from, a public standpoint. I mean,
Right.
we get 10Ks. We know everything about these companies. And I think they should operate more like that. I want to try to frame this in another way. Also, if you look at those companies and the revenue, a public company might have compared to where Hedera stands right now, we have a few $1 million worth of revenue. You're talking about, we'll say $1 million worth of unsubsidized revenue.
Sure.
Act like it, right? Be more careful, even though
Sure.
you can raise capital in other ways. Just be super careful with that and make sure you have their best interest at heart. And that means that, executives might not get paid what they would as middle management in a Fortune 500, or, as a CEO of another business that might have 35 or 50 or 100
Sure.
people in it. You want to cut that down because you're trying to act in their best interest and be as careful as possible. I also don't think that the pushback I heard from some people, and a lot of people, were the ones that were employed here, was, well, we have to compete for talent.
We have to attract the top talent. How can we do that?
Sure. But one thing that I've noticed is there are those intrinsically motivated people. People just want to work here.
Yeah.
And if that's not enough with a reasonable salary to want to work here, then we probably don't want you here in the first place,
Sure.
And you also want to put them on par with somebody who's allocating the capital. So we'll say there's somebody that is a professional, a doctor, a lawyer, a ship captain, that is getting paid what maybe a CEO at one of these organizations is getting paid. We'll say someplace between $200,000 and $300,000. And they take 20% of it, $50,000, and they put that into HBAR. So they're getting what at 10 cents, we'll just say 10 cents to make it easy. They're getting, $500,000 HBAR a year for that $500,000 or $50,000.
Yeah.
So if you put that in the same thing of one of these CEOs or one of the executives at one of these organizations, they should maybe get a $250,000 salary, and they should get, a bonus at HBAR, because you do want to give them some of the assets so they can share in that upside of about the same $50,000. It puts them on par. But if what we're seeing here now, if we see, them getting and I don't know what their cash salaries might be, but we'll say $250,000 still, but they're getting $1 million HBAR a month or 600,000 HBAR a month. They're no longer aligned. The executive at one of these organizations that is getting, 5, 6, 10, 12 million HBAR a year, they see that on their balance sheet as on their personal investments as a liability, not an asset.
Sure.
Because they want to sell that asset as soon as possible, because they could be fairly well off selling it right now. And maybe they want to buy a car or go on a vacation or put an addition on their home. So they see it as a liability, where the person that invested the money, they want to see it do a 10x before they might want to exit.
Right.
But there's no incentivization for the executive to want it to do the same thing, because they want to get out right now. So the incentive structure is completely out of whack. And I think we could do some things to address that. And I think it comes down to leadership as well. We can get into that. I'm going to pause there to see if you want to take it in a different direction, Brandon.
Honestly, I love the energy. I was just going to say, kind of to your point, I want to let you continue. I don't want to interrupt too much, but just maybe to add to what you're saying is there was something that Sam Altman, who is obviously like OpenAI guy, founder, And he said something that I think is really important is the best way to attract top talent to a company is to be solving the hardest problems. And I do think sometimes Hedera and these organizations, I don't know if they realize how much leverage they have in some ways, because when you look at Hedera as an ecosystem and, for example, like Hashgraph as an organization, it's like, talk about solving hard problems. Like that's really what the whole culture is about. That's ultimately what attracts people to these organizations. And there, for sure, we can talk about, this ecosystem's behind here, behind there, behind wherever. But in some ways, I think they don't realize how far ahead they are in some aspects. And when you talk about attracting talent, if you can frame it the right way, like if you're somebody in the Web3 industry that wants to solve hard problems, you should probably go work for Hashgraph or Hedera or some of these organizations. Like, and I think that that's sometimes where the disconnect is with some of this stuff.
Well, people, that's one of the things also going to that we want to attract top talent. Isn't it interesting that when people leave these organizations, they don't leave the ecosystem?
Yep.
And a lot of that is probably passion. A lot of it's probably experience. They know Hedera, and a lot of that is probably they've already gotten a fair amount of HBAR, and they want to protect that investment. So they want to fill the gaps in the ecosystem. We can look at Don Tebow. We can look at Brady. We can look at Christian. I don't think, and Christian can answer this if below, but I don't think he's looking to go someplace else. I think he still wants to work in this ecosystem.
Sure. Yeah.
So now he's not getting paid anything. Brady's not getting paid anything except for what he might be getting from Bonzo, which most of it's probably out of his own pocket.
Yeah.
So these people they're not going to leave. That's ridiculous. I really do think, that might be a little hyperbolic, but I think it's ridiculous. And the ones that do want to leave from that, I don't think they're the ones we want. I want to keep paying these people reasonable salaries, but let's not get too crazy. And we kind of already went through with that. But when you talk about the biggest problem in the Hedera ecosystem, it's not technical. We have the best services. We have, I do believe, the best tech. We have the best use cases. Karate Combat, there are other ecosystems that are drooling over them. It's Atmio and Zenny, and I mean, we could go through all of them.
Yeah.
All of those pieces are in place. The issue that we've had is a loss of trust and confidence. A loss of trust from the capital allocators that the leaders have their best interest at heart. And then they only have two choices. They can either try to voice their opinion and change things like I'm trying to do, or they can just pull their capital. And I think that's what we're seeing in some cases for people that don't feel that they have the platform like I might to be able to try to get things changed. Now, I do think things are changing. But to regain that trust, they have to go above and beyond at this point to regain that trust. And that means sacrifice. This is just basic leadership 101. Now, I don't want to seem like I'm bragging here or anything along those lines, but I've kind of been in leadership roles my entire life, going back to Pee Wee football, being the captain of the football team. In high school, I was the captain in the wrestling team. The other two captains, one of them went to the Naval Academy, the other one of Princeton. Pennsylvania wrestling can build some character, we'll say.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I went to a regimented academy in college, and I coached wrestling while I was there for younger kids. I was a squad leader my junior year. I was a division leader my senior year. I got out by the time I was 27 on a ship with 200 people. I was a chief officer. By the time I was 32, I was the captain. So 200 people. And we talk about these organizations. And I don't know if you were the first, but you said I should be CEO. Right?
Oh yeah, I was talking about the show earlier. It was like, it was such a weird thing of like, I send that out and then I find out later. I was like, what? I remember I commented on that post after. I was like, well, shit.
Yeah. And I mean, this goes back to, I think our fleet, the Transocean fleet at the time when I first became Master OIM or Master, and then later on I became Offshore Installation Manager as well. Master is the captain. I was 32. So out of 70 ships and rigs, I was the youngest captain. Wow. And, even going back to college, you learn certain things. Like, my gosh, let me see if I can go back. You had to say all the traits of a leader, accountability, bearing courage, consistency. Right. And you had to learn these things. And as a leader, a 32-year-old captain with, 200 people under you, and even more if you're talking the other ships that supported us, and onshore and all that kind of stuff. You need to learn and study leadership. And in where we are right now, one of the things that I found, and you can say this a couple different ways. One is never ask someone else to do what you aren't willing to do yourself.
Yeah.
It's about sacrifice. And like when I was on the ship, when I thought it was getting a little bit dirty or something like that, I would go out there and start power washing and scrubbing myself.
Right.
And then the rest of the crew would get the idea real quick and get things cleaned up. And it's about going and sacrificing my off time during that time to get them to want to do it, at least, during their tower while they're working. So what we're looking at now in the ecosystem is how do we regain that trust? I think it comes down to that sacrifice. So for an example, I was going back and forth with one of the leaders at the HBAR Foundation, and I gave him a suggestion because I wanted to help them fix some of the issues around trust, which I thought was the main issue.
Sure.
And they wanted to hire somebody at the HBAR Foundation. And I said, well, what you can do is have the executives at the HBAR Foundation give up some of their compensation so you can get this person that you think is really good and can really move the needle. That does so many things. Number one, it shows that you're willing to sacrifice what all of the other people you want to lead out there, you want them to do. Some of your salary, just like the capital providers that go out and buy HBAR, they're sacrificing part of their salary to try to make this vision come to fruition.
I think about that. I kind of get charged up. It's like there was a quote from Steve Jobs, and he said, in leadership in an organization, your function is to be the measuring stick for greatness, right? It's you should be what people measure themselves against. And that's kind of to your point. So that, like, hearing those kinds of things like that, that definitely gets me energized. Obviously it's not happening, but.
Well, that's what I'm saying when they need to do these things to regain that trust. Yeah. So it would show everyone that not only am I trying to get this new person in, but I'm willing to give up to do that.
Right.
So sorry, somebody just walked in on me. So
that's okay. They're listening in.
But you could do that on a lot of different levels. Like you could take some of your compensation, put it into account 800. These are the kind of things that can regain that trust that we're all pulling in the same direction. And we want to make this a success all together. So, I mean, that's all it comes down to is I want to see those things done by the leadership in our space, figure out ways that you can say, hey, I'm in this with you guys, with you builders. I'm in here with you capital allocators. I am in here with all of you trying to make this a success. I'm going to sacrifice for you. And I hope you continue to sacrifice for us. And I think if we were to do a few things, talking about, that CEO role, and people laugh at that because, I
was doing it like half jokingly. It's like the reason that I kind of support that idea is like, well, it makes sense. I mean, you've been there for a long time and you've been in the ecosystem. It's like, there's definitely, if you stack yourself up against all the possible things, it's like, okay, you can definitely, but what we have, it's like, just kind of made sense to me. But I definitely, other folks, it's like feedback's like, well, what about this? What about that?
Well,
what about
sure.
this?
Well, and that's who has the proper strengths to do something like that. And you can talk to some other people in the ecosystem that have brought, that I should have some kind of a leadership role in the past. They brought it up and I've been really reluctant. I do think I'm more ready for that because I think what needs to be done. I think I have, I mean, we'll compare the HBAR Foundation to the ship that I ran. The HBAR Foundation has, we'll say, and I don't know how much HBAR they have left, but we'll say they had $3 billion, right? Worth $150 million. They have, the entire ecosystem has a few $1 million of revenue. The HBAR Foundation has 35 people. Well, my ship had 200 people.
Right.
We had at the peak, we were getting about $500,000 a day in revenue. So $180 million a year.
Unsubsidized.
Unsubsidized by Chevron. I mostly work for Chevron.
Gotcha. Okay.
And talk about that asset. They have assets, under management of $150 million. Well, the asset that I had under management was $1 billion ship. They cost about $1 billion, a little bit more to build right now. But, we go back to the people that they want to bring in. They want to bring somebody maybe with some tech experience, things along those lines. And but I have that experience with, I think, rebuilding that trust, and something that most of these people don't have. I gave up $200,000 of my own money with capital that I got from another industry and putting that
Right.
into HBAR. So I know what those people that are allocating the capital, what they need, what they want, what they think success
Yeah.
is. And then I have, and it doesn't take many, usually things are pretty easy to fix. And I have like a list of 5 things that I would want to do, and that's it. And I think we would have it
Yeah.
fixed like that.
I've got you. Well, what is that list? Like when you talk about like hypothetical, like, okay, boom, you're in a, you know, whether it's the CEO of the foundation or some other leadership position, you know, what is that playbook?
And and of course this is hypothetical. The chances that I were to get
Yeah. Yeah.
something like that would be pretty low right now. But the first thing that I would do is, again, sacrificing some of our capital for those in the ecosystem, and that would be funding Account 800. You know, it would go
Right.
from 0.2% to 2%. Well, I think that's just a good way of allocating resources in general. You know, there's somebody that when they were building their application, they were actually using their staking rewards because they were an investor in HBAR too, to fund the development of their application. And then you're feeding into the people that are really successful, the people that are getting HBAR revenue, they get a bonus from staking rewards.
Right.
And you could just go on down the line. I just think it's more decentralized, it's more bottom up. I think it's a really good way to distribute HBAR, not necessarily always just giving it to employees first or something along, or
Sure.
just always
Yeah.
selling it and things along those lines. So the second thing that I would do is I'd call the leaders together, and I would say, how can we look at our compensation to make it a little bit more fair? And
That's a tough
I don't know
convo.
what their cash compensation is, but it probably could stay. And then for HBAR bonuses, I tie it to milestones. Um, Now, market cap, you might say, well, you just want the price of the coin to go up. I think, you know, milestones could include getting to the top 20, top 10, top 5. The
Yeah.
reason why I think that makes sense is because it's a measuring stick of how much capital we have in the ecosystem to build all of this cool stuff,
Yeah.
right? And across the board. And it's the resources that all these foundations have to be able to build things. So I think it is a good measuring stick. I don't know if there's better ones out there, but I think it is a pretty good one. The other
Yeah.
one would be revenue, unsubsidized revenue. If you get, like, put it at 25 million, 50 million, you know, full sustainability, paying for all of these organizations with unsubsidized revenue.
Yeah.
Those are the things that the capital allocators will see as a success. So that's what we should consider a success. And, you know, how I would do that is maybe you get 25% of your salary for each one of these milestones. And if you're there for 2 years, you know, that's going to be 50% of your annual salary over that time. But I want the employees, I want the people to be, and I put this in a post. So, I mean, people can go and
Yeah. Yeah.
check it
Yeah.
out. But I want them to enjoy the upside as well. So you can have accounts for each individual and be putting that HBAR into those accounts
Right.
the entire time, right?
Right.
And every month you market to market, you put, you know, 10% of their salary or whatever it is in HBAR in those accounts. It's locked up. And then once you reach that milestone over the following 12 months, you know, once a month, they get that distributed. Everybody, again, is aligned. Everybody thinks that,
Right.
I think those are the things that most people would consider a success. So that's what we should consider success as well. I think there is a rebranding that needs to happen, and it might even go deeper than a rebranding of the HBAR Foundation. It might be more structural. So
Sure.
facilitating that swap over. Um, I think I finished. So pretty much work with
Yeah.
the other leaders in the, or the executives in the organization to come up with those compensation changes, some kind of a restructuring, rebranding, to kind of start at a clean slate. I would also say that it is the HBAR Foundation, right? It's not the Hedera Foundation.
Right.
There are other organizations that are working very hard with a lot of focus on enterprise. The Hedera Governing Council themselves, we have Swirls and Hashgraph. They're almost exclusively focused on enterprise applications. We have the Hashgraph Association, which has its enterprise program, right?
Sure.
They're designed to be able to facilitate those things. I think the HBAR Foundation should be focused on building the HBAR economy, using it as a medium of exchange, and thinking about the HBAR holder, the HBAR community, what they want as number one.
Right. It's in the
And
name, you know?
yeah, HBAR Foundation, right?
Yeah.
Not Hedera Foundation. So if you pay attention to them, they are always your first users of all the applications,
Yeah.
right? They are, as I said, capital allocators, all of that kind of stuff. So if you put their interests first, I think you taking care of them, they will take care of you. And this isn't all just staking rewards and things like that. It's also things like, and staking rewards, to max them out right now isn't expensive. It doesn't take a lot.
Sure. Yeah.
But, and we can touch on that, but it's also things like, laser focus on and off ramps, on exchanges, on HTS support on these different exchanges, USDC support on and off ramp. Those kind of things are the things that they're focused on. So I would say this is our priority. Now, that doesn't mean there's not going to be things that we work on that's enterprise that have crossover things, but there is going to be enterprise things that we might need to assist with, but just put a different priority on top, because a lot of these other organizations already have enterprise as their main focus. So retail pays the bills, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, kind of what we're getting to here is, that kind of retail pays the bills. And it's funny, like that whole thing was so weird, because I think it was like a conversation in in a group chat or whatever. And it was just kind of like, talking about that intrinsic motivation, that sacrifice that's needed. And kind of the first step of that is just a kind of like reality check, like a community-wide reality check. And it was kind of like, what do we say kind of thing? And it was just like, I'm not wearing my retail pays the bills hat, but it was just one of those things where it was just like retail pays the bills. It's so short and it's so true. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how much you slice it. We've talked about how true it is. And
it's two ways actually that they pay the bills, but we can touch on that. I'll let you finish your thought.
No. What are those two ways? I'd love to.
Well, the one way is buying HBAR, right?
Right. Yeah,
giving value to the asset, the resource that these organizations have,
right.
To raise capital. And the second thing is we talk about unsubsidized revenue. So what's the main driver of revenue in the Hedera ecosystem that's unsubsidized? Yeah. It's smart contract calls for DeFi, right? That is retail. Yep. And a lot of those, and I think that's where a lot of the revenue could come from. Yeah. So, they pay it twice. And I actually did catch some, I don't know if you saw it, of course you did. The booth at the last Karate Combat event.
Oh yeah.
Huge shout out first to Joe, because he did so much work, but I was kind of from afar, kind of helping facilitate that. It was kind of my project when it came to the HBAR Foundation. And, Brady that night, do you remember him holding up the retail pays the bills?
I remember I saw that and I was like, what's going on? Like, this has just taken on a whole new meaning. It's amazing.
And some people looked at that and said, isn't that hypocritical? Because he drew a salary and he probably did pretty well. But
sure,
I saw it as a hat tip to what's obvious. Right. And I caught a fair amount of stuff about that, even though I didn't talk about that with Brady beforehand. I had no clue that he was going to do it. But when I saw it, I was like, yeah.
Right. Some people weren't fans of retail pays the bills. Right.
But I think it's the right. You have to keep that in the back of your mind. Who's paying my salary and what are their best interests? We've already touched on that. But that was telling to me that it was seen as an affront, something that seems so just inherent to our ecosystem, something that's just a truth. So
many ecosystems, like we look at any network and it's like, when you see these Web3 ecosystems, a lot of their success is from meme coins. It's from all these different types of things. I'll bring up Charles, the president of Hedera. He said on a Spaces, I don't know if it was last year. I think it was early this year. He was asked the question of like, what are we going to see first, retail adoption or enterprise adoption? And obviously he's been at all sorts of different networks and he's had a storied career. And he said, well, you have to get retail adoption to get enterprise adoption. Like the feedback we hear from enterprise is we need more retail activity because it's enterprise that's going to leverage retail built infrastructure, not really the other way around. And we see that play out in the technology industry in general. I mean, and so that was his point. And talking about Charles and talking about this retail pays the bills things and I want to kind of steer the conversation we've talked about where we've been, where we're at, a lot of the different problems that I think we can see as opportunities. I want to maybe like turn the corner here on like looking forward. And there was this post that Pluto from Hashpack put out that really kind of summed it up for me, similar to a little pithy line. He was like, winds of change, and that's why I called the episode this, winds of change. And I think it works because it's not like we can see what's happening or necessarily see anything happening, but I think that there's this shared sense of some kind of change happening. There's this talk of like Hedera 2.0. There's like in the meeting minutes, there's like this phase 4, like whatever it is. So I wanted to kind of throw it to you. And I know, you and I are in a really fortunate position, where we hear a lot of information, but I still can't really make sense of what's going on. And I want to kind of just hear it from you. Like, what's your, are you feeling that kind of wind of change? Are you kind of seeing those types of things, or is it not happening as quickly as we'd like to see or whatever? I'd love to just kind of get that temperature check from you. Oh, sorry. I think you're muted.
There we go. I think there's a lot of will from a lot of people to, and it's a great opportunity, right? We've had a shakeup. The ecosystem has been destabilized, and that destabilization can lead to a lot of good things. But we have to move in the right direction. And I think that's, again, it's just people showing good leadership. And it's not necessarily all the people in the leadership position. So an example, if you're an employee and you're at one of these organizations and what I've been saying resonates with you, and you think you would stay, I'm not saying people that are getting a reasonable salary, but if you think you're getting a little bit extra, or you've already gotten enough as far as HBAR, considering the things that I have said, talk to your manager, talk to the leaders in your organization and say, I think this actually makes sense. I'm actually willing to take a little bit of a step back to sacrifice and be a leader, because the leaders in these organizations might be panicked that I'm going to lose Brian, my best engineer, if I do this, if I have my employees sacrifice for the good of the ecosystem. So anybody can be a leader. I do think it's unfortunate because I think a lot of people have been pushing for change through what you would think of as the traditional channels, like talking to somebody that they might know in a PM, and there wasn't change. And it's unfortunate that I think it did take, an outcrying from the community to make change possible. And that's not the lesson, we necessarily want, because, we don't want, the mob to always think that they can influence things. But that's also, what regulation might look like in the future around this. There might be limitations on what the team can get. It might be things about disclosures. It might be actually giving some of these token holders voting rights on, if there is any governance structure, to influence some of those things, at least to inform those decisions. So yeah, again, going off on a tangent.
No, that's fine. No, I think that for me, I hear what you're saying. It's like, because there's so much opaqueness to what's happening behind the scenes and with the powers that be, we want to see these signals of change happening. I know we got that letter from Charles, and he did publish, like, there is now like a president's blog where he published an article about, like, what is it, like 70-40 rule or whatever it is. So there is some stuff happening, but I feel like myself, and I think many in the ecosystem, the feedback that I get is, I think it's clear that the outcry, as you kind of outlined this year, has resonated in some way with leadership, but like the call and response, like what's the signal back? What's the feedback loop? And I think that it's taken too long. I think that definitely, to be blunt, when it comes to like retaining talent in this ecosystem, Hedera is on borrowed time. Like it is alarming to hear.
Exactly, it is motivated. Yeah,
exactly. It is alarming to hear folks such as yourself, or even others that I speak to. I don't want to mention anyone specifically, but I do speak to many people that are beloved in this ecosystem that drive a ton of value into this ecosystem, that are similar to yourself, that are like, I'm not 100% sure I'm going to be able to be in this ecosystem next year. I have bills to pay, and I can't just pay Hedera's.
Somebody like Milan, right? You think about him, of course he's an HBAR investor, but he builds some fantastic stuff, and he doesn't get overly compensated for it. If we can attract more capital into our ecosystem, we'll say, I have a pretty good pile of HBAR. Maybe I'll invest in Nomad. Those are the things that we want to kind of incentivize. And when you look, at your employees, how much better are they than the Milans of the world that don't cost you any money? And there's very good employees across these organizations, and there's very good leaders at these organizations. I mean, I
wanted to just jump on that real quick, because I know sometimes on this show I can come across, and I think just the space that we're in right now is very can be viewed as negative or nitpicking or whatever. But just to pull back just for a minute, it's when we talk about, Swirlds Labs or Hashgraph or the HBAR Foundation or the Hashgraph Association, it's I know there's a lot of criticisms right now and they're under the gun, but there are so many good people at those organizations. So that's something that I just wanted to kind of call out. So, but yeah, we can go back to it now.
Well, I mean, Manson Lehman, you can just start at the top.
Exactly.
Rob is amazing.
Oh,
he's the best you could think of. If you want to talk about a CEO for the HBAR Foundation, he's it. The only reason, I don't think it can be him is because everything that he's doing at AP Plus, I think is more important.
Yeah, he responded to that tweet. Someone said to my tweet, they were like, "We should have Rob Allen as CEO," and he just responded I'm too busy.
He's too busy on Hedera stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, Manson Lehman, I do think that they've made some missteps. I think they followed the crypto culture, and I think a lot of that fell into overcompensation and things along those lines.
Right.
But they're really thoughtful people, and I think they can make the change. We just need to see it.
Yeah.
We do need to see these changes. And I think the employees, if they come together and make some of these sacrifices that are good for the ecosystem, and I mean, even that, some of it might be headcount reductions in certain places.
Sure.
And that's probably another thing that if I took over, there would be, there would be some changes there, because I do think not recognizing that that pivot that needed to happen to supporting some native builders, I think there would need to be some changes at the top. But I think they'll end up being, most of them, much better off. I think their families will be better off. I think they will be better off. I think they'll feel better about the ecosystem, will be happier. The feedback, the attention that Hedera will get. We need to lead as an ecosystem. Hedera needs to be the shining beacon on the hill, and we can do that. But it just takes a few little tweaks, and they are tweaks. It's not big changes. And going back to why we haven't gotten that feedback, I do think, and this could be good as well, that the council moves slowly. They deliberate. They have to go through these steps.
If I had an HBAR every time I heard that.
Yes, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating, but this is, they're going through a big test. We're finding out if they can govern. Because, of course, if I were dictator for a day, I feel like I could fix it really quickly. But we don't want to give that kind of power to a dictator. In some of these, it may be a de facto dictator. I mean, if Vitalik says he wants to do something, he's probably going to get what he wants.
Sure.
But that's not what we want. We believe in the governance, but they have a serious responsibility to address and make these changes. This is a one-time deal. I think they have one opportunity here, and they can't squander it. They have to make the moves and make the moves in the right direction. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I think that you say one opportunity, I'm like, palms are sweaty, mom's spaghetti. For me, I see that. And I think that I think that what it comes down to is an analogy I brought up. I don't know how effective it is, but an analogy that I bring up sometimes is almost kind of how we are in general when it comes to food. Like, we're largely disconnected from where our food comes from, and it leads to all these kinds of problems.
It's a great analogy, Brad.
Right? Yeah, it's like we go to a store and we just grab this package thing. We have no concept or value or connection to kind of where it actually comes from. Mm-hmm. And I think that what can happen in these types of organizations, and again, not talking specifically about Hedera or anything Web3, just in technology in general, it's a tale as old as time, right? A startup gets some money, they buy fancy desks and the compensation's out of whack and this and that, and you fizzle out. you can't really blame leadership or these organizations for succumbing to that when it's something that's so common in the industry. It's so difficult to overcome. It's a key challenge. And when we look at some of these organizations, some of these folks in leadership in the ecosystem are self-professed, crypto skeptics. And I'm kind of like, well, so it's weird. And it's like the exact opposite of intrinsic motivation. It's like, you have to be convinced to jump in and be a part of it. And for me, I look at that and I think about the food analogy, and it definitely feels like sometimes the value, which is in the form of their paycheck, their benefits, their this, their that, is so far abstracted from the actual source. Where does it come from? And I find it ironic that Hedera is identified with this substance overhype. We're not going to pump. We're not going to talk about HBAR, but it's what they depend on to stay alive. And it can be argued that the folks that have hyped this the most have been, not no fault of their own. It's the lay of the land. It's the par for the course in crypto, but it's like Lehman with, Fortune 10, coming, or this is coming, or the pipeline is big, or we're going to make it over the chasm, or this or that. It's like, I think it's also time for us to accept the fact that like, there is a lot of hype. It's not like, and it's about where do we place that? Where do we focus that? And it's just not been effective where it's been focused on. And can we refocus that into areas where it is effective? And that kind of brings us back to this beginning of our conversation, and kind of retail pays the bills is like the numbers show what fires are burning, what's generating revenue. It's like, what can we do to fan those flames even further?
Sure. Yeah, and going back to your analogy of, we're separated from where our food comes from.
Yeah.
Where is this capital coming from? And of course, there is a lot of professional class people that are supplying the capital, but it's also people, in third world countries and the global south, and that are just scraping together to be able to participate in this ecosystem. And the people that work at these organizations, they're professional class, of course. Right. And they live in areas where to have a reasonable living, you have to get paid more. I mean, that is understandable. And we get that. But understand that some of the people that are allocating this capital are dirt poor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're just taking some of their capital and giving it to, this ecosystem in hopes that we can make it come to fruition. And the potential here is enormous. And Hedera has had so many successes. The governing council is unbelievable. I never would have thought we would have had this kind of governing council. The use cases, I'm sorry, they are second to none. The only thing that we're missing is that disconnect from, from the capital, where it's coming from. If we can rekindle that relationship, get that trust back, I think we're going to be in really good shape.
100%. It's about the identity. What is Hedera? Who is Hedera? It's like, to me, it is a unicorn startup with a beta product that's seeing some great traction across different verticals. And that's really what Hedera is to me. And I think that it's that for a lot of people. And rightfully so, they've puffed themselves up, and they've had to really appear larger than they are in a lot of ways, and appear much more like a Fortune 500 or something like that. But does that at heart, has that kind of core identity been lost a little bit? It brings us back to that manager mode, founder mode, startup culture, move fast, break things type of thing. There's a big juxtaposition of like enterprise grade, rock solid, tried, true, tested, but this industry necessitates that you're moving fast and breaking things. And, it's like you look at the networks that are seeing that huge success, and they're constantly failing. They're constantly breaking. They're constantly, they don't have the best tech, but they're seeing this massive success. And it can be argued like, well, it'll take time. It's a 100-year organization. But at the same time, what do you do to keep the lights on? What do you do to keep the bills paid? To your point, it depends on people buying that HBAR.
Well, and let's not, it's each phase, we've had where we were. I mean, the price hasn't changed from the day one when we launched. And we've come so far in that
Yeah.
time. And I mean, from the tech standpoint, the fact that we've gone from when we first launched with less nodes, and we've gone from over 5 seconds to true consensus finality
Yeah.
down to 2.9 seconds.
It's
It's
wild.
like they are improving all the time. The council that they put together, the use case, everything. And the price hasn't changed in that time. Each step as Hedera becomes a success, and I absolutely believe that it's going to be a success. There's a new crop of people, and some people may be from the very beginning to the very end, but there's a new crop of people that are going to benefit. You know, the from the ones in the very beginning before we accomplished anything to now, they should benefit to a certain extent, and then from where we are now to where we're at sustainability as far as an ecosystem, and then the one after that where we absolutely become the trust layer of the internet. Each
Yeah.
one of those participants should benefit, and I want to see that, and I think that's absolutely has the potential to happen as long as we make a few tweaks here.
Yeah, I think you make it is a few tweaks. But I think that sometimes the most obvious things that can seem simple, it goes right back to your point of like just bringing this right back to the beginning of this conversation. There is technology problems, and then there are people problems. And Hedera at this point doesn't have a ton of technology problems, but there are considerable people problems, and you have to apply that specific focus to it and go, sometimes the obvious stuff is the most difficult. There's a lot of decoupling that needs to happen. There's a lot of change that has to happen. And I mean, in this rather opaque process of this Hedera 2.0 phase 4 initiative, this change that we want to see, that is kind of like this painful birth of a new era. It's one of those things where I really feel, and I said this at the beginning of the show, it's like it's these next 30 to 60, maybe 90 days of something's got to give, something's got to happen. And it can't just be in the form of shiny objects like this new use case goes live, or hey, we got this thing done, or this thing is happening here. I think it's about people. It's about culture. And that's kind of what you're talking about is we're going to have use cases. We're going to have all these things. And a bull market will come, and maybe some of these fundamental changes won't be made, but Hedera will be okay. The price will go up, whatever. For me, it's really about, I think there are some things that just can't happen again going forward. Like there's some things the network can't afford to have happen again,
Well, and the amount of use cases on Hedera, I mean, all of these things, the technical aspect, those aren't problems. I
Yeah.
don't see them as problems. The use cases need to grow. The things
Yeah.
that are happening behind the scenes when they come online, I think all of that stuff and just the natural growth can make Hedera sustainable. The problem we have right now is trust. It's
Yeah.
that's what we need to focus on and fix. So all of the things that you were talking about, the shiny objects, of course, they're real.
Yeah.
Those are things that need to happen, and they need to continue to happen. But that's not the main problem that we have right now, and the main problem we need to focus on. So.
Gotcha. Well, it's been an hour. We got to do it. We got to do another one of these sometime soon. But
Sure,
maybe
buddy.
what I'll say is maybe to wrap it up is maybe I'll ask you a question here, framing this from a different point of view. What would you say to somebody that's in this ecosystem that's like, oh, I'm so burnt out. I'm not seeing the change I want to see. I think I'm just going to leave.
I would say you want to give it 3 months because
Yeah.
we need to see if the all of the organizations, the leadership, the governing council, if they can make the right decisions. And I think there's a really good possibility that they do. And if they do, Hedera has the ability to have tremendous success. So if you've been here like me for 6 years, or you've been here for a year, give it a few more months.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on it and pay really close attention as we go through this, because if it looks like we're going to make those changes, I think a lot of really good things could happen really fast. So you don't want to necessarily miss the opportunity of staying involved or getting more involved, getting involved with projects, things like that. So keep an eye on it. If it looks like it's moving in the right direction, don't miss the opportunities to stay involved with the Hedera ecosystem.
Yeah. And what you said, bringing up Paul Graham again, he had another essay, and there's a quote from that essay that kind of talks about the technology train as an industry. And I think this is that we're also in Hedera, we're kind of having a shared experience to other networks and other industries, but like there's that quote from Paul Graham that the technology train leaves the station at regular intervals. And before it leaves, up until it leaves, people start to leave the train. They go off and cower in the corners. And he's like, if you can stay on that train car, sometimes you end up with a train car all to yourself when the train leaves the station. So it's that risk reward. There's a lot of risk right now in Hedera. This is the riskiest time to be in this ecosystem, but it also means when we look at the upside, when we look at the return potential, when we look at the reward, it's also there as well in such a big present way. There are power vacuums being formed. There's opportunity if you look closely enough. So I agree with you. These next 3 months probably are not going to be the funnest 3 months in the ecosystem, but it's really when I think a lot of these future main players will find their foundations and stuff. So I agree with you, and I appreciate you coming on, man. It's like it's great to have you on the show. It's nice to have you on the other side of things. And maybe before I let you go, and I know you kind of wanted to jump in there, but my last question to you is like, what other stuff you got going on? What's happening, with Twigital and like all these types of things? What do you want people to be checking out?
We're actually having a little Twigital summit next week.
Ooh.
So, and go try the application. There's going to be a lot of things changing around Twigital.
Cool.
I'm not going to give the pitch right now on the application. We think it has a tremendous amount of potential. But I will say the other thing that I wanted to touch on is I think now is not necessarily the riskiest time.
Okay.
But it's very close. I can see why it's the most uncertain time of which direction we're going to go.
That's a way better way of putting it. Yeah.
Because risk, I mean, we know that when we started, back in 2018, 2019, we didn't know if it was going to be successful. We didn't know if they were going to be able to build the council. We didn't know how the tech was going to work.
Sure. Yeah.
We didn't know if, we were going to be able to get a lot of good use cases. And
there has been harder times for this network.
We've answered those questions, but
right.
We're at a huge fork in the road.
Right.
So it's which way it's that uncertainty, because if we take the wrong direction here, I think it could be a failed project. But if we take the right direction, I think we're going to blow everybody else out of the water. And I think we could have done it from the beginning if these tweaks had been done from early on, but we just need to do it now.
Yeah. And I think that now more than ever, the community has the power. I think that we're realizing that power comes in many forms. It's not just sitting on the governing council or being in leadership positions. I think that the community now is realizing how much power they have, and when needed can wield that power. And I think that the most important thing is that we're not fighting with each other, right? Is that we're not seeing community members and fellow projects and competitors in this ecosystem coming at each other. There is a shared goal, and there are problems that we can solve together. So I think that to your point, something that can help us avoid that situation where this is a failed project is really a lot of us coming together and uniting and I love seeing, the wallets come together for the Wall Connect stuff. And I love seeing when competitors in the space support each other. Like that's really the magic, is what it's going to take to get stuff through. So I feel optimistic. I'm optimistically cautiously optimistic, but we'll have to see.
Oh, Brandon, it's been a pleasure. I got to come on and do this again.
Absolutely. We'll have to have you on again. Well, HBAR Bull signing off. Appreciate you so much, man.
See you, buddy.
Well, that was quite a conversation. A lot of different revelations. HBAR Bull, I don't know. I think I still stand by the tweet, CEO of the foundation. I don't know. I still stand by that. And I think, my thoughts just wrapping up on this is, I do agree. I think that risk is the wrong way to look at this. And that's how I've been describing it. But I think that, Brandon said something that's very true. It's uncertain. I think there is uncertainty. And that can be exciting, and that can create opportunity. And I think that really what it's about is, oh no, sorry, just tuned in. Oh my God, dude, you just missed it. It was a legendary. It's okay. It's recorded. You can go back and watch it after. It's all good. Don't panic. HBAR for the win, we ride. Yeah, honestly, my attitude of it is this. I mean, I'm riding this to zero. I'm an HBAR Barian for life. No cap. well, I mean, I'm wearing a cap, but you know what it is. You know what I mean? I love it. When we talk about intrinsic motivation, you could say I'm toxically, intrinsically motivated. And I think that looking forward, thinking about the title of the show, Winds of Change. I can't shout out to Pluto from Hashpack for that line. That's great. I feel it. I feel I feel the winds of change. I feel the wind in my hair. And I think that what's really important is the really difficult thing. And I think HBAR Bull hit on it well. It's like patience. That's the last thing we want to hear right now, right? Is be patient, things move slow, blah, 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 blah. That's the last thing we want to hear right now. But I think it's time for that. And it sucks. Like, I think that the community's been more than patient for literally years on a lot of things, but we have seen a ton of positive stuff happen. When we look at Hedera at all-time highs, right? When we were riding up to 50 cents years ago, there wasn't really anything on the network. We didn't have NFTs. We didn't have DeFi. We didn't have this stuff. And when we think about Hedera potentially hitting all-time highs again, it's a completely different ballgame now. We've got DeFi. We've got NFTs. We're going to have borrowing and lending. We're going to have a more complete ecosystem. And it just creates a further sense of urgency now where we need more bridges. We need more trading pairs for tokens, for HBAR tokens on centralized and decentralized exchanges elsewhere. We need more interoperability. We need more investment in retail. We need these types of things. These are what is going to be required to make this happen. And I think that ultimately, for the best case scenario, it's going to require substantial cultural change in the organizations, right? We got to flip that switch from manager mode to founder mode. I know it's a bit of a meme, but it is what it is. We have to do these things. We have to make these changes. And I will say, for anybody that works at Hashgraph or the HBAR Foundation or the Hashgraph Association or Hedera, watching the show right now and seeing this conversation, this isn't, and I want this to be clear to the community as well, this isn't a situation, and any governing council members watching as well. I mean, this isn't a situation where it's kind of like, you guys messed up or you guys are doing the wrong thing. What it's about is, that's just par for the course. What technology company doesn't mess up? What matters is, how do you learn and how do you change and how do you grow, right? And how do you double down on things that are working and just dump things that aren't working? How do you stay agile and fast, right? How do you move faster than the competition? Because as we know, it's not always the best technology that wins. There is scenarios where maybe Hedera isn't a top 5 network. I know that's the dream. But I think that it is going to take substantial change at these organizations and I agree with a lot of what Brandon's saying, what the HBAR Bull's saying. I think it's going to take a lot of change and it's going to happen really quick. But I do think that, again, to folks from these organizations watching is, you've also done a lot of stuff right. I mean, Hedera is a pretty awesome network. It's a pretty awesome ecosystem. There's a reason why we're here. There's a reason why there's so many intrinsically motivated people. It's not because all this stuff is bad. It's more so, I think a lot of the frustration lies in just people being burnt out and also too just seeing opportunities that aren't being seized. I think the community wishes that leadership could see things through their eyes and just, or dog food this stuff a little more, use these products more on the network, participate in retail a little more, embrace retail. I think there's a lot of fear that, for example, like Hedera's marketing isn't focused on retail, or is scared of it somehow, or something like that. And I think that there's an opportunity here. I think that the community just wants to embrace leadership in a way. I mean, it comes off as like, you guys are messing everything up. But as Brandon was saying, I think if there is some sacrifice made, if there is some goodwill, I think it would shock people at these organizations and leadership how warm the community is and how fast things change, how fast opinions change. And it can't be done through shiny objects. It has to be substance, right? Substance. That's what we're all about. Let's have some substance. But with that, let's see what else we got going on. I don't think there's any other stuff to talk about. That was a great conversation.